The Galactic Council's first impression of humans was, quite frankly, adorable. When humanity's ships first breached the void between stars, the advanced civilizations of the Milky Way expected to find another species obsessed with technology, commerce, or military might. Instead, they found vessels filled with creatures that brought their pets along for interstellar travel. Ambassador Zixel of the Arcturus Confederation still remembered his first meeting with human representatives. The delegation arrived with what they called a therapy dog, a four-legged creature with fur that served no apparent purpose except to provide emotional comfort. The other council members had whispered among themselves, questioning how a species could achieve faster-than-light travel while remaining so primitively attached to lesser beings. "They're like children," Zixel had declared during the closed session. "Bringing animals into space? They clearly haven't evolved beyond their planetary origins." The assessment spread quickly through galactic diplomatic channels, and humans were labeled as an endearing curiosity, technically advanced enough to join galactic society, but culturally primitive. This misconception only deepened when human colonies began appearing on frontier worlds. While other species established sterile, efficient outposts, human settlements always included spaces for what they called animal sanctuaries. They brought not just their domesticated species, but actively sought to preserve and protect dangerous creatures they encountered. The Rigelians were particularly baffled when humans requested permission to establish a sanctuary for void stalkers, massive space-dwelling predators that had terrorized shipping lanes for millennia. "These creatures have destroyed countless vessels," the Rigelian High Command protested. "They're a menace to civilization itself." The human representative, Dr. Sarah Chen, had simply smiled. "Every creature has its place in the ecosystem," she explained. "Even the ones we don't understand yet." The Rigelians dismissed this as naive idealism, but they granted the request, mainly to document what they assumed would be a spectacular failure. What no one in the galactic community understood was humanity's long history of forming partnerships with predatory species. They didn't see the millennia of cooperation between humans and wolves that led to the creation of dogs. They weren't aware of how humans had learned to work with eagles, falcons, and other predatory birds. The concept of humans swimming with massive ocean predators for research and conservation was completely alien to them. As human influence spread through the frontier regions, their settlements became known as havens for dangerous creatures. Other species watched in mixture of horror and fascination as humans casually interacted with beasts that most civilizations had spent generations trying to exterminate or avoid. The turning point in galactic perception came during the Proxima Centauri Trading Summit. A pack of feral shadow leapers, vicious predators that had evolved to hunt in zero gravity, broke free from a damaged containment vessel. As the station's security forces scrambled to respond, they watched in disbelief as the human delegation calmly stepped forward. Marine biologist James Patel approached the largest shadow leaper, his movements slow and deliberate. The creature, nearly twice his size with razor-sharp appendages, stopped its aggressive display. To everyone's amazement, Patel began communicating with it through a series of clicks and whistles, sounds he had learned while studying marine mammals on Earth. "They're just scared," Patel announced to the stunned audience. "Their containment pod lost atmosphere integrity. They're not attacking, they're trying to find a safe space." Within hours, the shadow leapers were safely relocated to a human sanctuary, but the incident marked the beginning of a profound shift in how the galaxy viewed humanity. The adorable species that brought pets into space suddenly appeared in a different light. Their seemingly primitive attachment to animals wasn't a sign of cultural immaturity, it was evidence of an extraordinary ability to connect with and understand other forms of life. A skill that no other known species had developed to such a degree. As reports spread of humans successfully rehabilitating supposedly untamable creatures, the galactic community began to realize they had severely underestimated humanity's capabilities. The species they had dismissed as childlike possessed a unique form of intelligence, one that bridged the gap between civilized space and the wild frontier. The Arcturus Confederation's diplomatic archives now contain a revised assessment of humanity, authored by the same Ambassador Zixel who had once dismissed them as primitive. It reads, "Perhaps we were the primitive ones, destroying or avoiding what we didn't understand. The humans show us there's another way, one that requires more courage than we previously imagined." The Galactic Security Council's emergency session was interrupted by an unusual sound, laughter. The source was Commander Elena Rodriguez, Earth's military attaché, watching footage of the latest failed attempt to contain a stellar leviathan that had been terrorizing the Orion shipping lanes. "With all due respect," she said, addressing the council members who stared at her in shock, "you're going about this all wrong. Those plasma nets and sonic barriers? You're just making it angry." The leviathan in question was a massive, space-dwelling creature, stretching nearly 2 kilometers in length. Its ethereal, almost translucent body could absorb energy weapons, and its natural ability to create localized gravity wells made conventional weapons useless. 3 different species' military forces had already failed to drive it away from vital trade routes. Perhaps the humans would like to demonstrate their superior approach? The question came from General Caxth of the Centaurian fleet, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Their forces had lost 3 warships trying to contain the creature. Rodriguez's response was immediate, "Give us 2 weeks." The human approach began with a single ship, the HSS Moby Dick. Unlike the massive battle cruisers that had previously confronted the Leviathan, this vessel was relatively small and equipped with what appeared to be primitive external floodlights and acoustic transmitters. Dr. Maya Patel, the ship's lead xenobiologist, had spent years studying similar creatures in Earth's oceans. "Space leviathans aren't so different from whales," she explained to her skeptical crew. "They're intelligent, social, and most importantly, they respond to patterns. We just need to learn their language." For days, the Moby Dick followed the Leviathan at a safe distance, broadcasting various frequencies and light patterns. The crew recorded every reaction, every movement, gradually building a primitive form of communication. Other species watched in disbelief as the humans deliberately attracted the attention of a creature they had been desperately trying to avoid. On the 5th day, they made their first breakthrough. The Leviathan began mimicking their light patterns. By the 8th day, it was responding to specific sequences, showing signs of recognition. The humans had established basic communication with a creature that other species had only ever seen as a mindless threat. But it was what happened next that truly shocked the galactic community. Using their newfound understanding, the humans discovered why the Leviathan had been drawn to the shipping lanes in the first place. The creature wasn't hunting ships, it was following the electromagnetic signatures of its traditional prey, which had been driven from their natural habitats by expanding colonization. The solution wasn't to drive the Leviathan away, but to help it find new hunting grounds. The humans created a network of electromagnetic beacons, establishing an artificial migration route for both the Leviathan and its prey species, far from major shipping lanes. Word of this success spread rapidly through galactic society. The species that had been mocked for bringing pets into space had achieved something unprecedented. They had turned one of the most feared creatures in known space into what they casually termed a gentle giant. But this was just the beginning. As news of the Leviathan incident spread, other species began approaching humanity with their own monster problems. The humans approached each case with the same methodology: observation, communication, and understanding. They transformed the dreaded void wraiths of the Perseus arm into patrol creatures for deep space expeditions. The notorious quantum sharks that had plagued FTL lanes were revealed to be natural cleanup crews, consuming dangerous spatial anomalies. Each success added to humanity's growing reputation. They weren't just tamers of beasts, they were interpreters of the unknown. Their ships began carrying specialized teams of xenobiologists, behaviorists, and what they called animal whisperers, experts in cross-species communication. The Arcturus Academy, once skeptical of human methods, now hosted a permanent human teaching staff. Their courses on xenofauna behavior became mandatory for deep space expedition crews. The galaxy was beginning to see that humanity's primitive connection to animals was actually an advanced form of emotional intelligence that other species had never developed. As one Rigelian scholar noted in their treatise on human exceptionalism, They don't tame these creatures through force or technology. They do it through understanding and respect. Perhaps this is why they succeeded where we failed. They never saw these beings as monsters to be conquered, but as potential allies to be understood. The age of the beast tamers had begun, and with it, humanity's position in galactic society underwent a dramatic shift. They were no longer seen as the cute newcomers who couldn't let go of their pets. They were the species that could walk up to the most terrifying creatures in known space and, somehow, make friends with them. The Ravagers emerged from the dark space between the Carina and Sagittarius arms. At first, they were dismissed as another form of space-dwelling predator, dangerous, but manageable. That illusion lasted exactly 3 days. The first colony they encountered, New Centauri Prime, was home to over 2 million settlers. When the rescue fleet arrived, they found only empty buildings and haunting silence. There were no bodies, no signs of battle, just vast networks of crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with an inner light. "They're not hunting for food," Dr. Alexandra Chen reported to the Emergency Council. "They're terraforming, converting organic matter into these crystal matrices to create environments suitable for their reproduction." Her holographic presentation showed footage of the Ravagers in action, swarms of translucent, geometric entities that moved with terrifying precision. The Galactic Defense Fleet mobilized in force. The most advanced warships from 17 different species converged on the predicted path of the Ravager swarm. The resulting battle lasted less than 6 hours. The Ravagers simply absorbed the energy from their weapons, growing stronger with each attack. Traditional military tactics proved worse than useless. They were actually helping the enemy. Within weeks, 3 more colonies fell. The crystal structure spread like a cancer across each world, transforming everything they touched. The Ravagers seemed unstoppable, their very nature defying conventional warfare. They weren't organic enough to be affected by biological weapons, yet they were too adaptable to be destroyed by physical means. The Galactic Council descended into chaos. Some species advocated for mass evacuation of the affected sectors. Others proposed using planet-killing weapons to deny the Ravagers their resources. The debates raged while more worlds fell silent. It was during one of these heated sessions that Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Expeditionary Force requested permission to speak. The Council, desperate for solutions, granted it immediately. "We've been watching these creatures," she began, displaying new data gathered by human observation ships. "They're not mindless destroyers. They're following specific patterns we've seen before in Earth's insect colonies. They're coordinated, yes, but they're also hierarchical. And more importantly, they're afraid." The council chamber erupted in skepticism. "Afraid?" demanded the Rigelian ambassador. "They've destroyed everything in their path. What could they possibly fear?" Chen's response was calm but firm. "The dark. Every crystal structure they create emits light. Every world they convert becomes a beacon. They're not expanding their territory, they're running from something. Something that hunts in the spaces between stars." Her team had discovered that the Ravagers' movement wasn't random. They were following a specific trajectory, staying within areas of high stellar density. Whatever drove them from their original home was something that lurked in the darkness of deep space. "We've seen this behavior before," Chen continued. "On Earth, when one species flees its natural predator, it often becomes an invasive threat to other ecosystems. The solution isn't to fight the invasive species, it's to restore the natural balance." The implications of her words slowly sank in. The Arcturian defense minister was the first to understand. "You want to find whatever these creatures are running from and bring it here?" "Not exactly," Chen replied, allowing herself a small smile. "We already know what they're running from. We've encountered them before, the Void Stalkers. The same creatures we've been protecting in our sanctuaries for the past decade." The chamber fell silent as the pieces fell into place. The Void Stalkers, massive predators that humans had somehow managed to befriend, were the natural predators of the Ravagers. The crystal structures weren't just terraforming tools, They were defensive measures against creatures that hunted by tracking energy signatures through the void. We've spent years studying the void stalkers, Chen concluded. We understand their hunting patterns, their social structures, their needs. More importantly, they trust us. We can work with them, guide them. The question is, will you let us? The council chamber erupted in heated debate. The idea of deliberately unleashing one terrible threat to combat another seemed insane. Yet, as reports of another fallen colony arrived, the desperate reality of their situation became clear. Finally, the council president called for a vote. The result was unprecedented, unanimous approval for what would become known as Operation Wild Hunt. Humanity, the species once mocked for their primitive attachment to animals, was now given authority to coordinate the galaxy's defense using the very creatures other species had feared for millennia. As the session concluded, a Xerxian elder approached Chen. "You knew, didn't you?" he asked. "All those years of protecting and studying dangerous creatures, you were preparing for something like this." Chen's response would later be recorded in the galactic archives. "We didn't know about the Ravagers specifically. But humanity learned long ago that in nature, there's no such thing as a monster, only unrestored balance. Sometimes, the thing you fear most is exactly what you need to survive." The human sanctuary ship HSS Noah hung in high orbit above Europa, humanity's primary breeding ground for void stalkers. Inside its massive biodeck, Dr. James Patel stood before the assembled representatives of 17 species, preparing to demonstrate humanity's most closely guarded secret. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all designations," he began, "welcome to what we call the Crossroads." Behind him, through reinforced observation windows, floated a creature that seemed to be made of living shadow, its form barely visible against the backdrop of space. "This is Artemis," Patel continued, "a third-generation void stalker born in human care. She represents our greatest achievement in Xenofauna partnership." As if on cue, the massive creature pressed closer to the window, its bioluminescent patterns creating a hypnotic display. The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. Even behind multiple layers of advanced containment, the presence of a mature void stalker was unnerving. These were the apex predators of deep space, creatures that had terrorized spacefaring civilizations for millennia. "What you're about to see," Patel explained, "is the result of 15 years of careful study and cooperation." He raised a small device that emitted a series of pulsing lights. Artemis immediately responded, her own bioluminescence matching the pattern perfectly. "We discovered that void stalkers don't just hunt by sensing energy signatures, they communicate through them. Their entire social structure is built around these light patterns." Patel's demonstration continued, showing how complex commands could be conveyed through specific sequences of lights. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just tamed these creatures, they had learned to speak their language. But it was what came next that truly shocked the gathered delegates. Admiral Chen took over the presentation, pulling up tactical displays of the Ravager advance. "We've identified 37 primary void stalker pods within reach of the conflict zone. Each pod consists of between 3 to 7 adults, all of whom have worked with human handlers. They're not just our weapons, they're our partners." The plan was unprecedented in its scope. Human ships would guide the void stalker pods into position, using their understanding of both species to predict where the Ravagers would strike next. But they weren't just unleashing the predators, they were coordinating a strategic campaign. "Void stalkers are intelligent pack hunters," Chen explained. "They naturally coordinate their attacks, herd their prey, and adapt their tactics. We're not changing their nature, we're directing it." The tactical displays showed simulations of how the pods would work together, creating a net of hunting zones that would force the Ravagers into predictable patterns. But the most controversial aspect of the plan was yet to come. "We're not just deploying the void stalkers," Chen revealed. "We're combining them with other species we've worked with." The display showed images of quantum sharks, capable of disrupting the Ravagers' crystalline structures, and space leviathans, whose gravity-manipulating abilities could trap entire swarms. The gathered representatives watched in a mixture of awe and horror as humans demonstrated their control over creatures that most species considered unstoppable forces of nature. Each presentation showed another layer of coordination, another level of understanding that went beyond simple training. "This isn't about domination," Patel insisted, seeing the unease in his audience. "It's about partnership. Every creature we work with chooses to cooperate with us. We provide them with what they need: hunting grounds, protection for their young, stable territories, and in return, they work with us." The Arcturian defense minister raised an objection, "But these are apex predators. They're inherently unstable, unpredictable." Chen's response was immediate: "Only if you try to control them through force. We don't control our partners, we coordinate with them. There's a difference." To prove her point, she invited the delegates to witness something never before shown to non-humans. In a secure chamber deep within the sanctuary ship, they watched as human handlers worked directly with juvenile void stalkers, using a combination of light signals, electromagnetic pulses, and what they called emotional resonance to establish bonds. "Every handler spends years working with a specific pod," Patel explained. "They learn each creature's personality, their preferences, their quirks. This isn't about commanding them, it's about building trust." As the delegation returned to the main chamber, the Xerxian elder who had once dismissed humans as primitive finally understood. "You're not beast tamers," he said quietly. "You're beast whisperers. You don't break these creatures to your will, you learn to work with their nature." The operation was approved within hours. As the delegates departed to prepare their forces for the coordinated defense, Admiral Chen received one final question: "Aren't you afraid? Working so closely with such dangerous creatures?" Her answer would become legendary in military academies across the galaxy: "Of course we are. Fear is healthy, it keeps you respectful. But humans learned long ago that the most dangerous thing isn't the predator that everyone can see. It's the threat that comes when you destroy the natural balance. Sometimes, the only way to face one monster is to make friends with another." As the first phase of Operation Wild Alliance began, the galaxy watched in amazement as human ships led their deadly armada into position. The species that had once been mocked for bringing pets into space was now commanding the most fearsome collection of creatures ever assembled. The hunt was about to begin. The battle for New Thessaly would later be recognized as the moment when the galaxy truly understood what humanity had become. The Ravager swarm had already begun their crystalline conversion of the colony world's southern continent when the first signal was given. From her command post aboard the HSS Nightwatch, Captain Maya Rodriguez watched as her tactical display lit up with dozens of energy signatures emerging from fold space. The Void Stalkers arrived first, their massive forms materializing like living shadows against the stars. Each pod moved with precise coordination, taking up predetermined positions around the planet's orbit. "All handlers, commence Operation Starfall," Rodriguez ordered. Across the human fleet, specially trained teams began transmitting complex patterns of light and electromagnetic pulses. The Void Stalkers responded immediately, their own bioluminescent patterns shifting in acknowledgement. The Ravagers detected the threat too late. By the time their crystalline defensive structures began to pulse with warning signals, the trap was already set. The first wave of Void Stalkers dove through the planet's atmosphere, their energy-absorbing bodies disrupting the Ravagers' communications network. But this was only the beginning. On Rodriguez's signal, the second phase began. Space seemed to distort as a pod of leviathans emerged from hyperspace, their massive forms creating localized gravity wells that trapped entire sections of the Ravager swarm. The crystalline entities found themselves unable to maintain their precise formations, pulled apart by forces they couldn't resist. "Quantum Shark pods, you're cleared to engage," Rodriguez commanded. The sleek, metallic forms of the deep space predators streaked through the chaos, their natural ability to disrupt quantum fields wreaking havoc on the Ravagers' crystalline structures. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. Void Stalkers herded groups of Ravagers into the Leviathan's gravity traps, while quantum sharks darted through the confined spaces, shattering crystal matrices with precise strikes. It was a deadly dance choreographed by human handlers who had spent years learning the hunting patterns of each species. From observation posts across the sector, representatives of various alien species watched in stunned silence. The humans weren't just controlling these creatures, they were conducting them like an orchestra of apex predators, each species playing its part in a symphony of controlled destruction. "By the eternal void," whispered a Rigelian admiral, "they've turned space itself into their hunting ground." The Ravagers attempted to adapt, their hive mind frantically recalculating strategies. But every time they found a potential escape route, they encountered another layer of the humans' deadly partners. Shadow wraiths, creatures that could phase through solid matter, disrupted their attempts to fortify positions. Stellar serpents, massive energy beings that humans had befriended near solar flares, created barriers of plasma that the Ravagers couldn't penetrate. But it was the human handlers themselves who proved most shocking to the observers. As the battle raged, they maintained constant communication with their deadly allies, adjusting tactics in real time. When a group of Ravagers managed to damage one of the Void Stalkers, nearby handlers immediately redirected other predators to protect their wounded partner while human medical ships moved in to provide aid. "They're not treating them like weapons," noted a Xerxian observer. "They're treating them like comrades." The turning point came when the Ravagers attempted a desperate gambit, concentrating their remaining forces for a massive push toward space. They almost succeeded until they encountered humanity's final surprise. The humans had positioned their newest partners, beings they called Star Weavers, in the upper atmosphere. These mysterious creatures, resembling massive webs of living energy, caught the fleeing Ravagers like cosmic spiders trapping flies. Within hours, it was over. The Ravager threat on New Thessaly had been completely neutralized, without a single human casualty and minimal damage to the planet's infrastructure. As the dust settled, observers watched in amazement as human handlers worked to calm their enormous partners, treating injuries and distributing rewards in the form of energy concentrates they had specifically developed for each species. The after-action report contained a notation from a Centaurian military analyst that would become famous throughout the galaxy: "We thought they were primitive for trying to befriend the monsters of space. We were wrong. They didn't befriend the monsters, they turned them into the most effective fighting force the galaxy has ever seen. And they did it not through control or domination, but through understanding and respect." As the human fleet prepared to move on to their next target, news of their victory spread rapidly through the galaxy. The species that had once been dismissed as too sentimental, too attached to their animal companions, had just demonstrated a power that no one had thought possible. They hadn't just tamed the untamable, they had transformed the galaxy's most feared predators into willing partners in the defense of civilization itself. Captain Rodriguez's personal log entry that day was brief but prophetic. "Today, the galaxy learned why Earth's history is full of stories about humans making friends with wolves and eagles and big cats. We've always known that the best way to survive in a dangerous universe is not to destroy the things we fear, but to understand them. Maybe now they'll understand why we never go anywhere without our pets." 5 years after the Battle of New Thessaly, the Galactic Council gathered for a historic session. The Great Chamber, once filled with debates about containing and destroying dangerous space-dwelling creatures, now hosted a very different kind of meeting. The massive observation dome above the council chamber had been specially modified for this occasion. Through its transparent panels, delegates could see a Void Stalker pod performing a graceful patrol pattern, their bioluminescent signals communicating with human handlers on nearby ships. What had once inspired terror now brought a sense of security. High Admiral Sarah Chen, recently promoted to head the new Xenofauna Defense Force, XDF, stood before the assembled representatives. Behind her, holographic displays showed scenes from across the galaxy, human-led sanctuaries where once feared creatures were now studied and understood, training centers where handlers from various species learned the art of animal communication, and defense stations where mixed teams of humans and aliens worked alongside their enormous partners. "The Ravager War taught us something profound," Chen began. "The universe isn't divided into civilized space and wild space, into safe zones and danger zones. It's all one ecosystem, and we're all part of it. The moment we understood that, everything changed. The statistics spoke for themselves. In the regions where human-led xenofauna partnerships had been established, piracy had dropped by 80%. Void stalkers, once the terror of shipping lanes, now helped escort merchant vessels. Quantum sharks, previously hunted as threats to navigation, were revealing new insights into the nature of spacetime itself through their natural abilities. But perhaps most surprisingly, other species had begun to follow humanity's example. The Arcturians, once among the most militant of spacefaring races, had established their own handler program. Their natural telepathic abilities, combined with human techniques for emotional bonding, were producing remarkable results with crystal-based life forms similar to the defeated Ravagers. We didn't just win a war, Chen continued. We discovered a new way of existing in space. Our partners aren't our servants or our weapons, they're our neighbors in the cosmic ecosystem. And like any good neighbor, they help protect their home. The changes went beyond military applications. Human xenobiologists had worked with leviathans to create safe passages through dangerous radiation zones. Star weavers helped maintain communications networks across vast distances. Even the mysterious shadow wraiths, once thought to be harbingers of doom, were revealed to be crucial players in maintaining the health of spacetime fabric. A young Rigelian delegate raised the question that many were thinking, but aren't you afraid? Living so close to such powerful creatures? Dr. James Patel, now director of the Interspecies Communication Institute, stepped forward to answer. Fear isn't the enemy, he explained. Ignorance is. We fear what we don't understand. But once you understand something, truly understand it, fear becomes respect, and respect becomes partnership. The council session concluded with the ratification of the Xenofauna Protection and Partnership Accord, a document that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. It established guidelines for the treatment of space-dwelling creatures, protocols for establishing communication, and frameworks for incorporating them into galactic society. As the delegates filed out, many paused to watch a demonstration that would have once sent them running in terror. In the space above the council chamber, a human handler named Maria Santos floated in a specialized suit, directly interacting with a juvenile void stalker. The creature's normally intimidating form seemed almost playful as it responded to her light signals, performing a complex dance of shadow and luminescence. They're like us in many ways, Santos would later explain to a group of handler trainees. They have families, they care for their young, they mourn their dead. They're not monsters, they're people. Different kinds of people, but people nonetheless. The galaxy had changed. The species that had once been mocked for bringing pets into space had transformed the relationship between civilization and the cosmic wild. Humanity's primitive attachment to animals had proven to be their greatest strength, turning potential enemies into allies and reshaping the very nature of galactic society. In the Xenofauna Defense Force's main sanctuary, a plaque now bears an old Earth quote that seems to capture the essence of this transformation. In the end, we will conserve only what we love, we will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. Below it, in several galactic standard languages, is added, and sometimes, what we fear most becomes what we need most. This is the human way. The archives of the Galactic Council now contain a special addendum to humanity's species classification. Where they were once described as charming but primitive, the new entry reads, Humanity, the Bridge Builders. Through their unique ability to forge connections with the most dangerous and mysterious species in known space, they have transformed our understanding of civilization itself. They remind us that in the vastness of space, there are no monsters, only potential friends we haven't understood yet. And in the deep vastness between the stars, ships now travel more safely than ever before, protected by the combined efforts of human handlers and their magnificent partners, the once feared creatures who now help guard the civilizations that once hunted them. This is perhaps humanity's greatest achievement, not conquering the monsters, but showing the galaxy that they were never monsters at all.